Turn with me to Matthew chapter number 5 tonight. Matthew chapter number 5. I'll be reasonably brief. Josh asked me to take the opportunity to kick off Operation Rudolph. We had Operation Rudolph here last year, but we got started a little bit late. I'm going to take just a moment before I bring the devotional thought to talk about Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. He's probably outside of Santa himself, one of the most famous secular characters in Christmas, right? He was created by a fellow by the name of Robert May that worked for the Montgomery Ward Catalog. And every year, the Montgomery Ward Catalog would try to come up with some new marketing scheme so they could sell more product. And that year, the folks at Montgomery Ward wanted to sell more coloring books. You know, this was back, I can't remember the years, but it was way back there. And he wanted to sell more coloring books. And so he wanted to come up with a unique concept where these children would love to buy these coloring books. Now, if you're my age or older, you know about the Sears and Roebuck catalog. Y'all know about that? You folks that are my age, remember that thing would come and it was that thick? And then at Christmas time, you'd have one about half as thick as the real catalog, and it was the toy catalog. Oh, I used to circle stuff in that, and I never did get it, but I used to circle it. I'd look at, tear the pages out, hang them, put them on the kitchen table. Maybe Mom and Dad would see them. But the Montgomery Ward catalog was prior to the Sears and Roebuck catalog. Anyway, Robert May worked for the Montgomery Ward catalog, and some of the executives there came to him and tasked him with the job of coming up with a character that would help sell coloring books. And the story goes that he took the idea from his own life and the story of the ugly duckling. How the ugly duckling was a rejected duck, and he took that and he wrapped it in some of the story of his own life, some things that happened to him, and how he wasn't exactly the most popular fella, and you know how the story goes. Anyway, it became a very, very famous movie, right? Now, here's a quiz. This is Wednesday night Bible study, so I'm going to give you a quiz, and I want to answer. Who sung the McDonald's? Who sung the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer song? Gene Autry. I knew one of you folks would get that. Gene Autry is the one that sung the song. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer had a very shiny nose, right? When people saw it, he glowed. But anyway, you know the story of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. The story is that he was born with a bright red nose. He was born different than everybody else. And it's a hard thing to be different, especially when you're a young person, right? I hope my mother isn't watching tonight, so I'm going to tell you a little story. When I was a kid, Converse tennis shoes were a big thing. Now, they're coming back now. Chuck Taylors, when I was young and a kid, if you had a pair of Chuck Taylors, you was the man, right? And then along comes Adidas, and along comes Nike, and even a company called Pony come along. Yep, I don't even know if they're still in existence or not. And every young man, and probably most young women, wanted, some Adidas, Chuck Taylors, or even, Pony tennis shoes. Well, my mother wouldn't get those for us. We didn't grow up that way. So we got what was commonly called, and if you're my age, you'll know exactly what I'm getting ready to say, Buddy tennis shoes. Right? Y'all remember Buddy tennis shoes. You know what Buddy tennis shoes were? Anything that was a tennis shoe that wasn't name brand. And if you had Buddy tennis shoes, you weren't much. You was just a buddy. And, it's hard to go into school and everybody else has got Chuck Taylors on and you got Buddy tennis shoes. And I remember I had to go into school and I had Buddy tennis shoes and they made fun of me. Well, when I was in the third grade, this is a true story. When I was in the third grade over Thanksgiving break, my dad and his brothers would go to my grandparents' house, and we had something, and this is going into the lesson, we had something what was called a hog killing. Y'all probably don't know what that is. That's when we killed hogs. And they would kill 3 or 4 hogs the day after Thanksgiving, and it was a whole ordeal. And us little kids, of course, we didn't have to kill hogs. We got to play. And I'd been wearing my buddy tennis shoes, and my parents, my dad's in particular, said, now don't go to the barn. Don't need to be up there. You're going to get yourself in trouble up there. Well, all my cousins are there, and we're playing and hide and seek, among other games. And guess where I wanted to hide? In the barn. I didn't just hide in the barn. I was going to hide in the barn loft. Nobody would find me up there. I'm in the third grade. And I climb up the barn loft ladder, which is just a ladder attached to the wall, and I reached for the railing post to pull myself up, and I missed it. And I fell. Fell on a big old flat rock, and I broke my left leg. Everything that happens to me happens on the left side. I don't know why. That's a different story. But I broke my leg. And I had gotten a brand new pair of cowboy boots, a step up from Buddy's. They were vinyl. They weren't leather. And I remember my cousin hollered at my grandmother, my mother, and my dad and my uncles. They come up there and they carried me back down to the house, put me on my grandmother's couch, and my leg already started to swell. And my dad took his case pocket knife and he cut that boot off. My ankle bone was poking out. Not through the skin, but poking out. You could see it. It was a good, solid break. So anyway, I went to had to go to the hospital, had to spend about 6 months. I don't know why you break your leg down at the ankle and the doctor wanted to put a cast up to your hip, but he did. And I stayed in a cast for a very long time, and I didn't get to go to school. Had to have a tutor come in, and I was real excited because when I went back to school, there was only like 2 months left, and I was ahead of the class because I didn't have nothing else to do but schoolwork, so I was way ahead. Well, the very next year, because I broke my leg, we went to a doctor. I had to go to an orthopedic doctor, and the doctor said, you've got to wear corrective shoes. Do you know what's worse than Buddy tennis shoes? Corrective. So I went to school in my corrective shoes, and I was made so much fun of. They call me things that's not politically correct for people to say today. And I really got down on myself. I don't know if my little daughter's ever heard this story. Have you ever heard this story? Yeah. I really got down on myself. I mean, I got to the point I didn't want to go to school because they picked on me so much. So I devised an idea that out in the front of my house, we had these hedges, these bushes. We had tall ones and we had these that spread out. And I would put my Buddy tennis shoes. Buddy's was better than corrective shoes. I put my Buddy tennis shoes in a garbage bag under the hedge. When I went out to catch the bus every morning, you know what I'd do? I'd slip by the front door, go under the hedge, change my shoes, put my corrective shoes in the bag, and I'd go to school just so I wasn't picked on anymore. Now that's rough. But I can't imagine how good old Rudolph felt. Rudolph got some redemption one night. The song says, on one foggy Christmas Eve, Santa couldn't fly that night, so the fella that had the bright red nose, that couldn't do anything right, that everybody made fun of, became the hero, right? So we have this program around here called Operation Rudolph. What Operation Rudolph is we order special tracts every year. And this year has got a great tract. It's called The Gift. And it tells the story of the plan of salvation and what Jesus did for you this Christmas season. And what I want you to do and what your pastor's going to ask you again Sunday, I can't remember how many of these got. It's 1,000 or 1,500. So when you start Christmas shopping this year, would you take a group of these tracts and pass them all out before Christmas? And let folks know that you are different, but you've got the message that can light the world. We did something a little extra this year. I'm putting that back in my pocket. If you want to take a whole neighborhood, Josh come up with some door hangers. Me and my wife have already decided we're going to hang one of these on every house in our neighborhood. And it's just a door hanger to invite you to our church and let you know that Jesus loves you if nobody else does. So these will be available on Sunday. These tracts are available back there now. So you'll be asked every week to take some of those tracts. And if you just come through the personal evangelism course, you know where to put them when you go to the store, right? If you're going to Kohl's, you put them in all the suit pockets. If you're going to the bookstore, stick them in the books, right? If you're checking out at Walmart, while you're sliding that card or sticking it in the slot, use your other hand and lay one there on the counter. My wife's got really good at that, by the way. And they don't even know it's there. When you leave a tip at the restaurant, leave one of these tracts and let them know that Christmas is more than Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. It's more than Santa Claus. It's more than presents and gifts, but it's the gift of eternal life. Would you do that? That's Operation Rudolph. You'll hear more about it Sunday morning, but Josh wanted me to introduce that to you tonight. Matthew chapter number 5. This sort of goes along with the story of my buddy Timmy Shoes and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Matthew chapter 5, verse number 13 and following. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt hath lost its savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing, but to be cast out and be trodden under the foot of men. You are the light of the world. A city that's set on a hill cannot be hid. Neither do man light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick. And it giveth light unto all them that are in the house. Here's verse 16. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. Now, if you know anything about Matthew chapter number 5, it is Jesus' first great sermon. In Matthew chapter 5, the verses previous to this are what we commonly call the Beatitudes. And it's blessed this, blessed that, blessed are if you do this, blessed are if you do that. And someone said that these beautiful attitudes or beatitudes is what they are. And right at the end of our verse 16, Jesus takes those beatitudes in the first part of the chapter and he turns them into beautiful activities in the last part of the chapter. Now, I think that's very important here. He's telling us how to be blessed. He's telling us what it takes to be blessed, and he gives us about 10 things there that are all hinged on the word blessed if you do this. And sometime I hope we'll go through that. And then after these 4 verses, he takes those principles, those attitudes, and he shows us how to take those attitudes and turn them into activity. It does no good to have a good attitude if you don't take the good attitude and turn it into a good activity, right? I mean, you can have a good attitude about something and still do wicked things. But here is beautiful attitudes followed by beautiful activities. But right in the middle of those 2 great principles, he has these 4 verses. These 4 special verses. And he's sort of telling us here that our reward for these beautiful attitudes, and some of those beautiful attitudes have to deal with persecution. Some of them have to do with suffering. Some of them have to do with loss. But he says they're beautiful attitudes if you look at them in the right way. And he's taking those and telling us in these 4 verses that we as Christians are to stand in the forefront of the world, battling as true soldiers of the cross, and to do what's right all the time. That's a tough thing to do. You know, I think about Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer when I think of that. Rudolph endured a lot of persecution. He endured a lot of suffering and a lot of sorrow. But when they needed him, he was available. You know, our attitude is that if somebody badmouths us, treats us wrong, doesn't do us right, our attitude is, fine, do it yourself. You're on your own, right? Or am I the only human here? Am I the only one that thinks that way? No, we all think that way. But look what he says. He gives you 3 marks of what we're supposed to be here tonight. And there are 3 simple things. I'll share them with you and then we'll go home. Don't say amen right there. He says, number 1, verse 16, or verse 13 rather, you are the salt of the earth. Now, I don't know if you've ever, I do this Sunday, by the way. If you ever eat with my mother-in-law, she ain't here. She said she was going to watch. So I'm talking about you, mother-in-law. I love her. She's a good woman. But if you ever ate with my mother-in-law, when her salad comes, when her food comes, no matter what comes before, the first thing she says is, where is the salt? She don't taste it. She don't try it first. She knows in her mind that it needs more salt. And I've asked her on more than one occasion. I asked her one day, I said, you don't even taste it before you try it. And she always says the same thing. She says, if I put salt on it, it makes it more appetizing. And that's what salt is, right? Salt is an appetizing influence. It makes things taste better. The church, simply because its existence, ought to be appetizing to the world. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't usually pour out salt in my hand and sit and eat it by the spoonfuls. Do you? You know why? Because salt don't compromise. There's a lot of folks, a lot of church folks that want to compromise and want you to eat all the time. Salt. No, a little salt makes it taste better. Salt's an article of food, right? You put salt on something, it gives it a little bite, gives it a little flavor, makes it taste better. It's the way a Christian ought to be in his life. We ought to be an appetizing influence for everyone we come in contact with. You know that? Now, let me get back to me breaking my leg. It was the day after Thanksgiving. Usually every year for 3 or 4 years in a row, they'd kill hogs. And it would be an all-day process. Late in the night, into the next day, they would begin to cut those hogs up. And my dad and my uncles and my grandpa, and he had a smokehouse and he had a meat house, and he would take those hams and lay them out on a bench. And you know what he would put on those hogs' hams? He would put a mixture of salt, brown sugar. And I was just a kid. I'm not smart. But I do know every time I ate a piece of country ham, it's salty, right? Matter of fact, it ain't much good as a country ham if it ain't salty. The saltier, the better. But that salt was put on what is called a green ham. That's a fresh ham. It is used as a preservative. It is a purifying agent. Did you know that salt is not an antiseptic? An antiseptic cures poison, right? You medical people. But an aseptic is void of poison and prevents the spread of poison. And it's amazing how those mountain folks figured out that if you salt cured a piece of pork, that it would last for years and years and years, because that salt would purify. But it not only would purify, it would preserve. Salt preserves. We as believers ought to have the lifestyle that let me say how I could say this, that prevents is the best word, the complete takeover of corruption. That's why it's important that Christians vote. That's why it's important that Christians get involved in politics. That's why it's important that Christians get involved in their societies at work, because they need to have an influence in the world they live in. When Josh was just a little fella, he played t-ball. You all heard about his great baseball career. I prefer to tell that his last year in baseball, he had a perfect batting average. He told y'all the truth the other night. He didn't get a hit. But I like to tell, I like to put my son on a positive. He had a perfect batting average, 0. But when he played t-ball, we lived in South Alabama, and his t-ball team and the league, rather, decided they wanted to play ball games on Wednesdays and on Sundays. And a group of us got together and went to the league officials. A group of Christians went to the league officials and said, hey, our kids can't play. Our kids are not going to play if you start playing on Wednesdays and Sundays, because that's very important to families around here that we have church time. And they put up quite an argument, and they tried it once or twice. Most of the kids didn't get to attend. But it wasn't long that they made an announcement there'd be no games Sundays and Wednesdays. Now, I know that was a small community, but I believe Christians made a difference. It says here in that one verse that if salt has lost its savor, it is good for nothing. The Christian who loses his testimony cannot be a testimony, can he? Remember, several years ago, I went into the barbershop where I used to get my hair cut, and this one barber usually cut my hair, and sometimes I'd let the other guy cut my hair. And I went in there one day, and the owner, the one that usually cut my hair, wasn't there, and there was a different barber sitting there. And it was my turn in the chair, so I got in the chair, and I sat down, and I said, hey, let me ask you. I said, we go to church. This fellow began to give me this glowing testimony of his church attendance and where he went and what a great believer he was. And we had a good conversation. And then I said to him, well, let me ask you this. What happened to the other barber that used to be in this chair? Here's what he said. I don't want to gossip, but he completely ruined his testimony that he had with me. If salt hath lost its savor, it is good for nothing. Here's the question I want to ask you tonight, and we'll move on, and I'm almost done, believe it or not. Are people better for being around us? That's the question I want to leave with you. He said, you're the salt of the earth. The next verse, he says, you're the light of the world. What's the light of the world? Jesus is the light of the world, right? We are to give the light of Jesus to the world. Jesus said in John 8:12, I am the light of the world, and he that followeth me shall not walk in darkness. A light not only lights, but a light enlightens. You ever notice that? In my living room, we got 2 lamps. We got one on one side of the room and one on the other. And you turn one on, and the room lights up good. You can see plenty. But sometimes my wife is sitting over there, and I'm over here because we got a good marriage. And she'll say, honey, would you turn that light on? And I'll turn the other light on. And you know what happens? the room gets a lot brighter. It is enlightened. That's what we're supposed to do as Christians. Give light, enlighten, but we're also to expose evil. You ever noticed most bad things are done at night, except coon hunting. Most bad things, burglars come at night. Folks are more afraid at night. Things happen at night because evil loves darkness. And you know the best way to turn night into day is turn the light on. He said, you're the light of the world. Then he says, you're not only a light of the world, but you're a city that's set on a hill. Not everybody can build a city on a hill, but everybody can light a candle. He talks about that. He said a city's built on a hill. He said it's like lighting a candle and putting it under a bushel. He said nobody lights a candle and covers it up. We as Christians, we at this church need to be a landmark, a city set on a hill, a light that's not under a bushel, but that's on a candlestick. You know, landmarks in the Old Testament were actually piles of rock about as high as this pulpit here. They marked the boundaries, the corners of the land. They didn't have fences, so they had these landmarks. And sometimes thieves would come along and they would move those landmarks just a little bit at a time, maybe a foot at a time. And if you notice the landmark, you wouldn't think too much about it being moved over until it was too late. You see, Jesus is telling us after those beautiful attitudes, we need to be like that landmark where folks can go and find an anchor, a solid rock. There was back in early 1900s, I think it was, there was I can't remember the fellow's name. He was a great violinist. He wasn't a fiddle player. He was a violinist, if you know what I mean. There's a difference. And he had a concert one time in a great auditorium over in London, England. And he played an hour concert on this violin. And everybody was enthralled. He done such a magnificent job that at the end of the concert, the whole auditorium was standing and applauding. And just applauding. And they wouldn't even sit down. They were hooping and hollering, and they were just, this guy had done such a masterful job on that violin. And one of this violinist's friends that was helping him there with the equipment noticed that the violinist was just standing there and sobbing and crying. And his friend went up to him, he said, you're overwhelmed with how great, how wonderful a job, and how these folks they're just enraptured by it. He said, no, I'm not. He said, I'm a failure. And the fellow said, what do you mean you're a failure? The whole auditorium is cheering for you. The whole auditorium is applauding you. And they love you. And he's crying. No. He says, I'm a complete, utter failure. And the guy's like, are you not seeing what I'm seeing? He says, look out there. He said, they're still standing and applauding. And he said, that one man right over there is not standing. The guy did what all good friends would do. He said, hey, that's just one guy. Don't worry about him. The rest of the auditorium thinks you're magnificent. And the violinist said, you don't understand. He's my master. He's my teacher. And he's not pleased. If we please the entire world, we can please the entire world and let Jesus down, we're failures. Rudolph, with your nose so bright, won't you guide my sleigh tonight? It ain't gonna hurt us a bit to please the master. Sure, somebody might make fun of you. Somebody might not like it. You may have to wear buddy tennis shoes. But it's more important to please the master.